Good afternoon, everyone. And if you're joining us from the diaspora, um, good morning. Um, I'm Comrade Adenka, deputizing briefly for Comrade Shongo. That was a brilliant presentation there, taking us back to um, pre-colonial Africa, how the society were then and how the society were organized and how the development were uneven. So, like he said, if you have any contribution to make, you can raise your hand electronically by using the raise hand option in the chat's settings. And if you like to just give make a contribution, you can use the comment box. You can write your contribution there. I haven't seen any hands up. Okay. Comrades OAG hand is up. We also have some comrades on the ground here. With me here is Comrade Adebayo and Comrade Adewale. Um, Comrade Adebayo wants to contribute to the presentation, but before Comrade Adebayo, I'll quickly take Comrade OAG. Comrade OAG, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Good greetings, everyone. That was a good presentation. I'm OAG. I'm with the Movement for African Emancipation. The thing that I do take away from Rodney's book is that it serves as a critical map or guide way for us to understand that society is in constant motion. And if society is in constant motion, and where we are, if it has been in motion due to some forces, be it external or internal, and we can have like a framework to see how this society that we're talking about has evolved, then we should also know that at this critical junction that Africa is, it's also in motion. Like, this is one thing that I take personally away from Rodney, that our society is also in constant motion now. And it gives us, the understanding that interference or interference or interventions at a certain point in time has resounding effects or things that it can do to nudge the trajectory of a nation, be it positive or negative, in negative direction or positive direction. And now, what are the critical elements that we must look at to see where we can intervene in nudging of Africa into a proper direction? From the analysis that we've gotten, like we can see the farmer header crisis and how the thing is still lingering into modern day Nigeria, and it's become, a huge source of concern for us. So how are we going to take a look at history and also contribute into pushing things in the proper direction? Like, it's just an internal type of thing. Like, how do we try to make a good assessment or an accurate assessment of where we're coming from and where we're going to, and to realize, most importantly, that society and what we call, in quote, civilization is in constant motion. And we shouldn't feel like, oh, this is the way things are, and then it cannot change and all that, and then which gives room for, changing the societal order in terms of having revolutionary awareness, having revolutionary responsibilities, and also carrying them out, under the backdrop or the context of knowing that there are things that can be changed and that we've not always been, maybe backward people, or, in contrast to what the European would want us to believe and all that. So I feel this Rodney book kind of breaks the shackles of smashes the construct, the fake and fictitious construct that Africa doesn't have anything to look back to the past in terms of pride for, and then to look forward to the future in terms of what we can build. So that's just my own contribution to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Age. That's a brilliant one. Of course, we have to look back and see how we can retrace our steps and how we can re-educate ourselves on pre-colonial Africa and the things we were able to achieve before the invasion of um, the colonialists. And so, yeah, with me here is Comrade Adebayo. So, Comrade Adebayo will make a contribution to the ongoing discussion now. So, Comrade Adebayo, you have the floor.
Greetings, everyone. I just want to add one or two things to the discussion on ground. And from my own contribution, I just wanted to emphasize on how history has been portrayed about Africa. And when it comes to African civilization, people always feel as if Egypt is the only place where civilization took place in Africa. And like we've seen how Rodney was able to bring out different social relation in every different part of Africa, from the northern part to the southern part to the western part. We see how civilization has grown, how production have grown, how people were able to keep the social relation in check. Not that Egypt was the only civilized empire at that time, or was the only place whereby we can um, align civilization with. We can see even in another part of Africa how people advanced in iron smelting. When we even talk about our own monarchical system was being checkmate by the what's it called, ruling council and so on like that. And also I wanted to draw my own conclusion when Walter said that Africa was in the stage of transiting from colonialism to feudalism. And if you try to understand what Whitney Contest was saying, that communalism was still in place in Africa, regardless of the aspiring, or let me say the evolving class as at that time, but it was still being checkmate. And the reason why I was trying to just bring out this is that we need to understand the European context of feudalism that led to the subjugation of North Africa, that led to the mass invasion of how Europeans perceive Africans, because they try to understand Africans from their own perspective of their culture. Because if we realize African European feudalism, we realize that it was in an extreme form, whereby it has this relationship of the ruler and the ruled. So the ruler sees the ruled as what's it called, as an aspect of labor whereby they could expand wealth creation. So they diminished the serf so much to the extent that they feel like in our quest to expand our empire, to expand in our quest to expand our empire, in our quest to expand wealth, we use our own cultural understanding to view the world. That's why these people never really understand our civilization. So they understand civilization from their own perspective, whereby when they wanted to coin other places, or wanted to colonize other places, or invade other places, all they think about is just to look for labor, to exploit the land, imperialism. They never see that these people out there in Africa, or these people out there in Australia, or these people out there in America has their own way of life, have their own civilization, and the development their development determines how their environment was. Like we said, the reason why production was just that big as it was in Europe was that, like what I witness said, we have this distribution of clans everywhere. We didn't have this stick structure whereby it was able to imbibe state structure, strict structure to control production in a mass base. So these people, this is one of the reasons why people don't really understand African civilization before they could be able to bring their own analysis of who we are. Maybe we are developed or less developed. And like we said in our previous chapter, we shouldn't try to understand development from the aspect of economic trajectory. We should try much as possible to understand the social relation of that day, which the social relation of the society or a particular epoch that we are talking about. And in addition, I wanted to also wanted to say that uh, uh, um, understanding context on the context of what's it called, a social relation, they see some aspect of it whereby it draw African development back, because like we said, the social what's it called, the superstructure and the base determines how Africa developed. So as at now, development has left that stage of colonialism, subsistence farming. Now at this base, economic development still determines how we view development. So I still feel like in some aspect of African culture still hold us back. So we still need, in a way much as possible, to understand the transitioning of how we can be able to move Africa off that social terrain as a dent to now. So that's my own contribution for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Comrade Adebayo. Well, I'll just quickly like to add that the social relation you're talking about actually, there wasn't enough time to explore because due to colonialism, everything was frozen. So I don't really understand your point because right now we're actually not. Um, we didn't continue from where Rodney was actually talking about. There were a break in between due to. So I think the focus should be on how can we, you know, look at how things were done, particularly the communal practices in the pre-colonial era, how they do things communal. We can compare to today's what we talk about when we talk about the ideas of socialism, what we can do to actually bring a kind of cooperation instead of individual what's it called, individual, like capitalism, massive exploitation, exploiting workers and all that. So, I just wanted to stay on point. So I get your point, but what I'm just saying is that colonialism actually froze all of that, and we didn't have the time to, progress from that point. So, yeah, I just want to add to that. I have Comrade Bright Ogundare's and Hoff as well. Um, Comrade Ogundare, you have the floor. Please introduce yourself and give your comment. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon. The movement for African emancipation for actually creating a sort of discussion like this. It has actually been enlightening. And Walter Rodney actually made very cogent points about why Africa was the way it was before the white man came. However, for me, I'm a sort of skeptic, so to say, on trying to pin everything on African underdevelopment on Europeans. Um, if and then I will start from this major. The first point is that we tend to group when we make our analysis of Africa, we tend to group the people in the upper Sahara Africa with sub-Saharan Africa, and I think that's one of the first mistakes that a lot of African analysts make, trying to analyze, trying to lump up Africa together. You can't. Events in Egypt, for example, had a separate trajectory from from events in from events in say Yoruba land, and these two actually had huge impact in how the two developed. For example, geographically, I would not probably group Egypt as part of ancient Africa, or group somewhere like Tunisia and its economic development or its socio-political development with Africa, because they were two different things. In reality, places like Egypt were more contiguous or continuous with the Middle East, Euro-Asian landmass. Talk about Mesopotamia, talk about the Canaanites, talk about the Hittites. They formed a separate core group where civilization actually intermingled. So so for me, when we want to analyze what, and then it's not as if when I want to analyze the role of the Europeans in Africa, then I tend to concentrate more on the sub-Saharan Africa. And then when we also look at the sub-Saharan Africa, due to geographical constraints, we have different civilizations that are far apart. Different civilizations that are far apart, that had different trajectories, and each also had its own impact on how they related to the white when the white man came. And then when you look at the political atmosphere of Africa, you see that we have a lot of small states, that were just probably just occupying mass, though they had their own civilization. For example, let's take an example of Nigeria. We had in the Yoruba land, we have different kingdoms with different kings. We have the Oyo, we have the Jesha, we have the Egbas. And then this in itself is a bane to development. Now, it's a bane to development. It did not allow Africa to eat that momentum for an industrial revolution. What do I mean? What do I mean by that? Let's take for example Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire. They had, and the barbarians invaded. We had a lot of kingdoms, a lot of principalities. We had, at the time, we were talking about 500 different kind of kingdoms and likes. But after some times, the system actually allows them to conquer themselves, and then at the Peace of Westphalia, they were able to agree on a definite framework for each state. They were able to agree on, okay, this is England, this is Spain, this is Turkey, this is Italy. Unlike in Africa, where we still had these several states, and then the white man then came and disrupted everything and did not allow those processes to actually form and build up large states. The whites came and disrupted the process. They built up, and they didn't allow the building up of large states that could drive development. For example, if the white man had not come, it's not they will have been conquering and wars in Africa, and then it would actually give rise to super states, super kingdoms, which will have a structure, which will have a social political structure that will be able to drive up the development. So I think that is one of the major things that one of the major ways Europe actually contributed to our underdevelopment. Because what did they give us instead of allowing the super states to develop themselves? They drew up a geographical map and they give us countries that inside those countries the fights that would have happened even without them coming was still happening, and it was not allowing those states, those countries to develop. Then my second point is that I think we tend to overestimate we tend to underestimate the slavery market in Africa before the white man came. Now, when the Arabs and the Europeans came, they met a fully developed market for slavery. They make it now, and why do I say this? Why do I say this? Now, when you look at Yoruba, let's take the Yorubas for example. When you look at Yoruba language, when you look at Yoruba proverbs, when you look at Yoruba lexicons, idioms, you would see that the Yoruba man had a definite idea of the roles of slaves, the roles of lords, and the like. So the slavery market in Africa had already fully developed. The average rich man in for example, the Yoruba land had slaves. Had slaves. The slaves they had slaves. What the white man, what Europe only did, and what the Arab did, was to make dealing in slaves profitable. Now, before, the only thing you needed for slavery, was that the only thing that African slavery needed was, okay, I get my slaves, they work in my house. And don't forget, when you have a, a high concentration of slaves in a society, the society tends to revolt. So what the white man, so when the Europeans came and offered huge money for slaves, it created a supermarket for slavery where I can get as much slaves as possible, but I don't have to worry about the consequence of having more slaves in my society than it should be, because they are not in my society. So that was what happened. So if we are so as much as possible in our analysis, we should not try and tolerate the traditional African society for the guilt of slavery. So that is my contribution. Thank you.
Sorry, I have a question for Bright. Have you read the book?
Okay, go ahead, Bruno, go ahead.
Yeah, that's my question. Have you read the book?
Not really. I was invited for this program some minutes before.
Okay, I think that a comprehensive reading of the book will bring a lot of clarity to the things that you're saying, because some things you're saying is not historically correct. Dr. Rodney goes to like great lengths to really dissect what kind of slavery was happening in Africa, the different development processes in the different parts of Africa, why why the lack of integration on our part was really detrimental to the development of Africa, what indentured servitude means, just a lot of points that you were trying to unpack. He really goes into it. Just for like historical accuracy, I think you would really benefit from really diving into the text, because Walter Rodney really does a lot of scholarship on the like historical process of how we were disenfranchised. And I think that when you say I forgot the last thing you said, something about putting us not taking any responsibility or whatever, I think that really erases the violence of colonialism. Yeah, they made it profitable. I mean, like, make no mistake, the process of getting so-called Africans was a violent one, in which people were murdered, families were separated, people were taken by force against their will. So it wasn't a pleasant experience by any means. Most of the slaves that they got, they weren't getting slaves that were already captured from wars, and we have the right to do that as people, like every of society wars. So I just think that you might just really benefit just because they're like people here, and you might be talking to other people and people who might not really have really read the book as well. We just don't want to be spreading, saying things that like ahistorical, just historically incorrect.
Okay, I get your point. But what I'm actually driving at was that, now I'm not trying to reduce or trying to rationalize slavery or trying to rationalize the horrors of slavery. I'm only saying that the processes of slavery had been ingrained in African society. In fact, had been ingrained in almost all human societies. Even before Europeans came to Africa. So what the Europeans only did was to exaggerate the market. That was my point of view. Though I will still do a lot to. I will still.
Okay, Comrade Bright. Yeah, thank you for that. I will leave your contribution and the questions and some of the inaccuracies that I feel uh, that comes with your comments to the presenter for today's program, that's Convention Go to answer. But before I let him come in, I quickly want to say that we have to be conscious of times, because I think it is you can't equate the slavery that was being practiced in Africa to that of Europe, and to actually say that slavery was a big market, or I don't know how you phrased it. It's I think that was too extreme. Talking about Africa, because even you were talking about the Yoruba lexicon and the proverbs and all of that. You even found that in the Yoruba lexicon, the phrases they say that "Omo Erun Doba," it gives you the differences in the practice of slavery. We're talking of European slavery that was brought about, like it was like a huge market for them to advance capitalism. You cannot equate that with the African system. Talking of indentured slavery, where the slave can actually become king. When we talk of the European slavery, there is no such thing. We want to talk about the Abba Seriki and the other slaves that were captured and trained by the Europeans to come back here to be chiefs and obas, to actually help them to continue the trading of Africans to the European markets. We have to be conscious of the times. These things happen because I think you are mixing it, and also talking about that we should not put the whole blame on the Europeans. Well, in my opinion, I will put all the blame on them, because they came here, they froze our development. Because if not for colonialism and the imperialism that we have today, Africa has not been left alone since the European people came here. If you look at Africa, the leaders that came, socialist leaders that emerged out of Africa, they were all killed, murdered. So we cannot uh, remove the white people out of the discussion, because their hands are still found in the African problem. So I think we should be careful how we approach this issue. So quickly, I'll bring in Comrade Shango to um, comment on your contribution.
Yeah, I don't have much to add actually. I think thanks Bumi for your intervention, and thanks Yinka. I think from what Bumi said is what I would have said. Not only to have a look at what I wrote in this book, but to look at this thing objectively and through the research that is available, and to please go back to the presentation I just made, which was clear that in North Africa, and I think you were sorry, there were parts of your presentation I didn't quite catch very well, but you're making a distinction between North Africa and the rest of Africa. And I think in this discussion here already, Rodney already specifies that the system in North Africa was different with regards to slavery, because it was already a feudalist system at that time. Of course, because we're talking at that time when North Africa had an interaction with the Arab world and other aspects. So, so we have to be very careful. We don't paint the whole of Africa with one brush in the way you seem to have done. Though you started by making some distinctions. And Rodney was very careful. If you have a look at that presentation I made again and have a read of the chapter, you see he has been very careful to state, being very specific in terms of, where there was feudalism or where there was slavery and why slavery, what type of slavery there was in parts of Africa, and he was very clear about it being different in North Africa. He talked about Asia, where slavery was widespread, but not, dominant mode of production as it was in Europe at one time. There, there are differences to these things. But I think the key thing you're trying to say is that there were slave markets. Yes, I think to an extent that was true in parts. Again, in parts of Africa, not overall. You're not to say, in parts of Africa which were already having a relationship with the Arab world, and so it's very important to get that in mind. And saying something about Yoruba idioms and whatever, and what you can understand from Yoruba history. There's a lot of tendency to look at recent history without doing a proper rigorous study and make a mistake to confuse what was there originally with what has been already foreign influence and say it is all the same tradition. You can look at a lot of Yoruba practices that were just recent inventions or recent things that happened due to the interventions of the Europeans, or even in terms of the Arabs. So, but this thing, the idea that largely we had communalist practices, we had um, uh, little feudalism or developed feudalism, um, went hand in hand with the fact that anywhere where you had slavery practice, which is, as Bumi, said, it's a question of war or something like that. As Inka has said, what the practice was not the same as an understanding of slavery. And in fact, there's even a point at one point. I know this is kind of a justification for a person would make, but Tinubu, who was a major slave trader, was said to have said, that she actually had no idea that what the slaves that was involved in marketing were going to do, and she regretted the actions. I know, I'm just saying that it's just to say that there was a difference. There was no widespread development at all, at all. And in terms of slave markets, no, not at all. And the fact is, as we dive into the book and you see, and if other sources of history are there, is that a lot of the slaves were come about because the Europeans actually foment, divisions and clashes and conflicts, that increase slave taking and where they can come in. A lot of this of what we are relating to the European slave trade was very much directly fomented, not something that was just because it was there originally and it was just there. And if they hadn't done all of this, they would have just come say, take money, buy slaves. People would just be selling them slaves. Do we actually think that is how it happened? Well, I think the fact is anyway that we will dive more into the book. Obviously, I think you should certainly have a look into it and look at other sources about what was going on in slavery. That is not to say, again, there's this idea that because we are talking about how Europe underdeveloped Africa, we are saying that there was no issue about Africans having any responsibility. We are talking about a sense in which class divisions were beginning to happen. Exploitation was beginning to happen, and that is the basis on which some people will exploit for their others, and so it's a, and just as the same as we now have leaders who are exploiting us on behalf of others as well, the puppet leaders of the colonialists. We're not just going to say, well, it's all the fault of Europe, we don't have these people here. In fact, at the end of when we discussed chapter 1, we actually, Rodney spoke about that particular question. So where he referenced Frantz Fanon, in terms of the puppet leaders, and not to say that he's talking about not Africans not having a responsibility. He said Africans have two responsibilities. Firstly, to understand correctly the history, to understand that, have a good grasp of it. And secondly, to remove the puppet leaders that they have. So so that's for me. It's like let's not give Rodney turn Rodney to saying what he didn't say. This book has to be read carefully. I think he was very careful in parts of it, And I really encourage people to go back, when we publish the presentation, have a look at it, have a read of the chapter. I always forget to say this when we're presenting this thing. It's not, we're not just here to present and say people shouldn't read the book. In fact, there's no substitute for reading the book. We're just trying to get people interested in this thing so that people can actually really dive into it themselves, and dive into other aspects of research. So I always encourage people to go back and read the book. Yeah, so that's what I have to say. So please, anybody wants to come in, please do come in.
All right, thank you, Commissioner, go for that. I think Commissioner Adebayo wants to contribute to. Okay, let me see. I think we have a chat. Yeah.
I would like to contribute if that's possible.
Of course. You have the floor, Commissioner Usman.
Hey, how you guys doing? My name is Usman. I'm from Senegal. And just to bring awareness of what's happening in Senegal, hypothetically, it's the same thing going on in Senegal. The Europeans always have their puppets and, find a way to control our government from their ends. And that's the chaos that's happening right now because the president is heavily involved into the decisions that France are making, or France is heavily involved actually on the decisions that are being taken in Senegal and arrested like around the West. So right now, in terms of the currency, I've been talking about it and I've been bringing awareness to a lot of the population about, the CFA, which was originally created by Hitler, and Hitler used it against France to feed his troops. And so Charles de Gaulle, which was the hypothetically the French president or the governor at the time, or whoever was ruling France, as far as in their wars and colonialism, he figured that Hitler used the currency as just stuff that to trick them to feed their troops and stuff. So he ended up doing the same thing with the CFA, and that's the reason why West African has the CFA, which is a completely a big trick, and giving our money to them. Right now, if you look at the budget, we are serving about 500 billions a year to France. Which French, if you really look at it, they really don't have no natural resources. So modern slavery exists, and the colonialism still haven't left the West Africa specifically. I'm not sure about the entire Africa, but I know everywhere France has what they have their hands on, they're still taking in a very big way. And as far as slavery is, and we cannot compare what was going on back home and what they have brought, because a lot of it was a king will possibly have some people that work for him, and that's because they're trying to gain their life to get to a certain position, and they was able to. Slavery was a total different thing, where to the point that you was taken out of where you was, and you was forced to work, and you was forced not to you're not getting paid. And if we look at the cases of the Black Americans that we are living with in the U.S. right now, they are going through so many things that was caused by slavery. So just in comparison to that, it's totally different. It's a different world. These people did it for over 400 years. So that's what I had to say about it. And also trying to get these countries out of where, like trying to get France out of Senegal and all the countries that they colonized, because they're still applying the CFA rule or the CFA currency, which we don't print, we pay taxes on, and is backed up by Europe, which is technically kind of crazy, but we have to get out of it. But that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Comrade Osman. Yeah, that was brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah, looking at the European influence on African states in the present times, we will see that they have all their hands littered all over the African government, and trying to control our economy, and impose on us, what will benefit them. Yeah, I think that. Thank you for explaining to us the political um, uh, issues going on over there in Senegal. Um, that's key to the contribution and to the discussion, and we appreciate that. So, Comrade Bumi, um, I can see your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you. So I'm still trying to formulate this thought. I'm still like working through it, but just bear with me. But there's just something about the what am I trying to like get at here? There's just something about like the particular like there's a lot that we don't know just about our own history. We don't really know anything about our own history and our own, I guess, our own like dialectic. Like when Walter Rodney's talking about how the kids who grew up like in pre-colonial times, they could name like 10 flowers or something in their immediate environment because that was a means of their own survival. Like they had mastered their own environment in that sense. And then when colonialism came and blah blah blah, that pattern was kind of destroyed, and people were learning about winter and things that didn't really concern our own material conditions per se. And so like that's just like an example, like, and you can use that for like anything for real. Like we don't really know anything about our own environment and our own like circumstances. We're very disconnected from that. And like one thing that's
We always talk about different things, and you know,
and one thing that is one thing that
I'm like that.
Comrade
sorry,
okay, can you please mute yourself, please?
No, it's important stuff now. Like that's something that different.
Comrade okay. Um,
Important thing in this country that is constant. This country is very
please.
okay. So like one thing that stood out to me when I was reading the book was how he talked about just because we've been talking about responsibility, the Europeans and things like that. And I think that's something that like really helping me really understand our situation is that the so-called puppets.
Hello, was someone talking to me? Sorry. Bumi, sorry.
No, we were just saying that your mic was on, and so I think it was like just you
Okay.
like just to mute yourself.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. So yeah, so sorry. So he in the book he talks about how like even in like while slavery and colonialism was going on, there were Africans who were writing like scrolls about how slavery was good. And I believe he even said that some African men wrote in French like a mini manifesto on behalf of like Europeans. So like I think that it's helpful, at least for me, not to think of these people as like isolated incidents or like removed from like the greater struggle, but like an inevitable part of the struggle, so to speak, like, and then like a consequence of like colonialism and slavery. Like these coons, like I'm gonna paraphrase here, quotation marks around coons. These people, like coons, puppets, whatever, like they've always existed amongst us. Like, and I think that that's like, what else do we expect when like we're raised or like separated and alienated from ourselves? Like it's not really, the conclusion is not that we come to people who are conscious and like people who really understand what's going on. Like it's like it's not like determinism or anything, but it's like seems inevitable that that's like the conclusion that we would get to. And I think that if we can view it as part of like them being a part of it, like how like I'm still trying to like understand like dialectics, but like if we can view them as part of the whole, then we can like try and work them out as a contradiction themselves, like work those people out instead of like, I don't know, like viewing them as like an aberration of a sort, like, you know, as like, oh, like how Du Bois says that slavery wasn't an aberration in the whole thing. It was just like part of the process of like European, like capitalism and European development. I don't know. I just think that it might be helpful not to like really view them as separate, just part, because that way when we encounter these kind of actors and these individuals, their existence isn't so jarring to the rest of the people, I guess.
Thank you, Comrade. Thank you, Bumi, for that. Comrade Akil also wants to contribute to the discussion. So, Comrade Akil, quickly.
Um, I wanted to talk about the state of slavery in Africa, and it has already been ironed out, but I still want to say one or two things about it. Is that the kind of slavery back then in ancient Africa was that it was not institutionalized and it was not monetized. It was like maybe it's an act of war, people bring in slaves and things like that. And over time, they try much as possible to integrate into the society as as the normal subject of that society. And also, I wanted to iron out the issue of identity, because this has always been a very prevalent and current issue right now among we Africans. Because who is an African, and how do we perceive the identity of an African? Because you know, a lot of people still feel as if the Northern African is not part of Africa due to the what's it called color of their skin, or let's say color of their skin. And people are really to understand that over time, historical conditioning happens, but we still need to move from that, because even in ancient time, we will see how people migrated from the southern part of Africa to the northern part of Africa, and they integrated to the society. So as at now, we should understand that historical conditioning has happened. You know, people have migrated from Africa, from Asia down to Africa, and the integration have took place. You know, we have people like mulattoes, and we have we have people like mulatto. And on this case, I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday who has this mixed race, is a mulatto, and he was telling me that how do we perceive Africans? Because the person recently came to Africa, and he was telling them that I'm an African by an origin, and my father is an African, and my mother is white, and I'm trying to be African. But these people try to perceive that you are not African, you are white, you are kind of this, that. Is there a stereotype for how we view Africans? And people just need to also understand that in Africa, we don't actually see ourselves as African fully, because we usually try as possible to identify ourselves with let me say by the tribes or the clan we came from. Even as of today, if you ask most Somalians don't see themselves as African. They see themselves more of being a Somali. And on that context there, even in Nigeria, we are having issue of whereby people try much as possible to see every people from the southern part of southwest of Africa as southwest of Nigeria as Yoruba. But people don't understand that even within with the context of Yoruba, we have like clans, and these clans we have like people like Egba, people like Ijebu and stuff like that. So before we start seeing ourselves as Yoruba, people still see themselves more of maybe I'm an Egba man. I'm an Ijebu man. You know, people just see themselves of that. So the culture of identity of who to be an African, for me to be the people who feels like I have an origin trace back to Africa, and I'm trying to be an African, and I'm even doing more of an African. And one thing I also feel as if we should take more important things is that what is the reality of Africa presently now. The reality of Africa presently now is that we all in every region of Africa are facing two things, which is the oppressed being ruled by the oppressor, and it's prevalent all over Africa. That should be our main issue. In Africa presently today, we are being confined under a colonial state, and you know, and we are even facing the aftermath of neo-colonialism, and it is everywhere all over Africa. So those are the things we should be seeing, the similarities we'll be seeing, that this is the similarities we faced as an African people, geographically. So those are the issues I think we should be ironing out, we should be talking about, because those are the people, those are the issues that connect us through our history. And I think that's my summation for now, because I forgot what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, come here, you have your hand up. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm audible. I just wanted to add a little bit to what Bumi has just said. We should try to understand the effect of material, domination on the psyche of people. If the people have seen that what has blanketed them for hundreds and hundreds of years is the dominating rule of a certain group of people, then what happens to the psyche is that it's crazy, because they now start identifying, since that's the only sun in your sky, you now start identifying with the exploiter or the dominating clan. That's what I feel has that impact on the person that's colonized, that tries to identify with Europe, that tries to identify with France, or that tries to identify with the oppressor. And they now internalize the being of that oppressor and start proclaiming France, start proclaiming Europe, because you've looked left, right, north, south, up and down. There's no shining light, or there's no pathway to hope for you in this all-enveloping darkness of slavery, in this all-enveloping darkness of colonialism. You look left and right, there are the gendarmes or the French gendarmes, or the British Olokpa, or the police people. Like, you don't see, there's no kind of pathway to struggle that you see that can guarantee your liberation at that point in time. So what do? You feel like, okay, maybe if I identify with these people, I might have a little bit of, break from the direct brutalization or the oppression. And down from that time till now, you start seeing, like, there was a picture that I saw online where someone tattooed picture of Bola Tinubu on their back. Like, what does that mean? It means you've so much internalized your oppressor that you feel like, okay, maybe if I show some sort of solidarity with these people, I might get some crumbs, because their rule is the ultimately, I'll use that because when we have class struggle, they will understand that they are not the only sun in the sky. They will understand that orders can be overthrown and systems can be changed. But what the people that haven't discovered class struggle, or that haven't had a coherent program of liberation, do is that they internalize their oppressors and they start trying in serious manners, in whack or caricature manners, to vomit their oppressors in terms of, being a photocopy, of their oppressors, So you see that, people keep telling you, oh, you can't make any headway, you either join APC or PDP. It means you feel as if it is through the context of your oppressor that you can even have a headway into making a little bit of change. But when you totally unplug from your oppressor, and like Fanon said, like, when you hear about your oppressor in that violence chapter, when you hear of your oppressor, or they start making allusions to your oppressor, when you come to the brutal determination that it is time for decolonization, when you hear anything about your oppressor, you mock them, you sharpen your knives, you sharpen your weapons for that ultimate confrontation. So at that point in time, most of the Africans that had probably internalizing these people maybe hadn't had, a form of a coherent liberation package or something, I'd say. So, like, what's total domination of the oppressor does to the psyche of the oppressed is that the oppressed starts to internalize the oppressor, and then they want to be like them, like in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire talks about something like that, So I'm just trying to maybe add to a little bit of your thoughts. So I don't know if it makes any sense or not. So yeah.
All right, thank you, AG. Bumi, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Actually, that makes sense. That makes sense. And like, what it's becoming like more like abundantly clear as I move in certain spaces, just on social media and talk to people, is that someone asked me the other day, is poverty violence? And I just had to laugh internally, not because you have to take these questions seriously when people ask these things. I had to laugh internally before answering the question. And I think that obviously there's a dissonance. There's a particular cognitive dissonance that people have to navigate through, just the structural violence that is Nigeria or any African country. And I think that just making interventions when we are in certain spaces and naming the violence as what it will be like really beneficial. And I think that I'm just like, because you brought up Fanon, and I'm just thinking about beginning where he says decolonization, anything, movement, anything it's always a violent event. And it's so funny because it's not funny, but it's funny because in that moment when you try and have a discussion, because people really do have this metaphysical outlook on life where they believe, because of like whatever Abrahamic religion, whatever it is, they really do believe that we live in a sort of egalitarian society where everything is equal, and that there are just a few bad seeds. There's like the whole whatever the fairy tale is that people believe, people really do, and people are truly committed to that. Their whole identity is really rooted in that. So like when you come and tell people, no, this is violence, this is intentional, this is systemic, and like people really want you dead. And I think that, at least for me, what I found to be effective is not to really mince my words, really like searching for the most provocative words I can find and really using it because I really want to hit something when I talk to people. So just like naming the violence as violence. And I think that people don't realize that we've internalized a lot of like the feelings of our oppressors. Like, it sounds funny to say out loud, but how can you not know? Like, we have 2 weddings, for goodness sake. Like, and we call it a white wedding and traditional wedding. Like, I think that these kind of things would be obvious for people, but these things are just like, oh, no, this is normal. But like, I think that naming things as violence really makes people stop in their tracks and really be like, oh, like, wait, what? Like, all of this is intentional. People know what's going on, and people just don't like care. And I think that just removing like morality, or like not assigning like morality good or bad to things, and like coming at it to people scientifically really helps people see that, yeah, like these people are violent, and they continue to be, they really want us dead, and they're not letting up. So yeah, I just wanted to thanks.
All right, thanks very much for that. That was interesting, insightful. Uh, Before we close, does anybody else want to say anything? Okay, I just before we round up, I want to say, if you are new to MAE, you should please check us out on our social media pages. We'll post the details, and if you want to partake in our groups, uh, to get more regular information, you can leave your number, um, leave your phone number to be added to our WhatsApp groups. And like I said, we will continue the chapter. I'm not going to guarantee that it will be next week, but soon enough. I think a lot of things that have been discussed here will be clarified again. Next week, the first concrete example Rodney is going to discuss is going to be Egypt, which is not ancient Egypt, but Egypt around before the Europeans came, which is already at that time a feudalist Muslim society. So that will clarify some of the differences between that kind of society and other parts of African society. So we'll be publishing this session on YouTube, um, and previous sessions are also available. So overall, and I think it's quite crucial because the thing we seem to have is often a lot of misunderstandings in the sense that you know which is why we are doing this, is that we have a lot of misunderstandings about what development is, why Africa is in the state it is, the ideas that people tend to have that it's just simply a question of leaders or leadership without understanding the structures of society, why society is corrupt, for example. Um, and a lot of the points of view many Africans take end up being justifications actually for racism, end up being basically an idea that Africans are just innately corrupt, or Africans are just, what somebody said the other time, Africans are just naturally oppressive to one another. It's in the DNA of Africans. um, or Africans are just, simply lazy. So having a structural understanding of society is very important if we're actually serious about how we want to change it. And the discussion we've had today is really quite clear that you the role in which the development of class exploitation uh, starts to lead to where it can be positive for some progress or some time. It also becomes very detrimental for a society. And in the case of Africa was not even allowed to have a natural evolution, but had an extreme form of exploitation forced on it in a way no other society, actually, no other place had to go through, despite people always trying to make some comparisons with maybe China was colonized, or and why is China so great now, not really actually understanding the structural basis, for Africa's underdevelopment, to understand how we get out of it. So yeah, so I'll leave it there. um I wish the person who raised the point about slavery was still here, but he has left. So I think I encourage people to join us in future sessions. Um, yeah. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. We really appreciate those of you who have joined us today. I hope we have learned something, or we have found it interesting and useful. And thanks for those who have made a contribution as well. So